So
Yeah.
what is the status right now of your channel?
Oh,
And
the
I know
channel-
that a bunch of them were, a lot of people got where they got.
Yeah, a
like,
lot of people got axed.
platforms.
A lot of people got axed. I mean, and people got axed for stupid stuff. Like Ford Fischer, for example, he's a journalist. He just goes out, takes the camera, shows what's taking place, puts it on YouTube for people to see. YouTube took his channel down, and they were like, you should have had some kind of commentary to counteract what was taking place in the video. He was like, it's an actual video of what happened. And they're like, yeah, but that's harmful content because you're showing the Capitol riot and you didn't have anybody to say that this was wrong in the video. Like it's stuff like that. For my channel, they said this video was harmful content. And then they come back, I think it was like maybe a week later, and they say, our bad. We were over aggressive. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. If you're over aggressive, so you mean there is some leeway in regards to the decisions that you're making? Meaning, how are you not acting as a publisher at that point? Like, think about what I'm saying for the moment. The moment that you say this content is harmful. Now, that's Orwellian in and of itself. The language is being
the whole thing freaks me out. The whole thing freaks me out. And the fact that people don't see that is the fascism, that is the problem, is it's crazy. You can see how groupthink works and how people can so be herded into believing something based on fear. And it freaks me out to no end. I didn't even like that they deplatformed Alex Jones, and he's a nut.
I was big on that notion of, it is insane to deplatform Alex Jones. Because I think what they're missing is, the issue is credibility. And it's not credibility of people like Alex Jones. It's credibility of things like mainstream media, where people feel like we're being lied to. I mean, if you're looking at like the stats on how people consider mainstream media and everything, it's lower. It's low. It's not because of the Russians. It's not because of the Chinese. It's because they get it wrong. I mean, 9/11, they got it wrong. The dishonesty about what was taking place in Syria. I mean, when Chelsea Gabbard went on and said, "Hey, Jake, we're arming terrorists in Syria," and Jake was like, "Well, the government said they're not doing that." Well,
but they're not journalists anymore. And
I know that's kind of my point, right?
It's like
the information that these people get have such a spin on it, and they don't get that it's an American spin. It's not the spin from if you're sitting on the moon looking at the event, so you say, okay, I want a contextual point of view of the world in order to make my decisions on how things are. That's not what it is. It's, we need you to take this narrative and run with it, and you can take.
And it's not just American narrative; it's a corporate American narrative.
Corporate American, that's right.
And that's the problem. I grew up. My background is in journalism. I went to journalism undergrad. I went to journalism grad school. Like, it's something that I always took. Well, University of Colorado was undergrad, and then I have a master's from Northwestern from Medill Journalism School. Fancy. And so, like, my background is, I actually love what a real journalist, like to me, there is nothing that is more powerful than really what the Fourth Estate is supposed to be. And that is to me very sacred.
Siegel is one of my favorites. I can't think of his first name. He wrote the book called Reporter, Dark Side of Camelot. He was the one that came out making the point that said the Turks had access to the chemical weapons and that Obama knew that these guys were transporting that stuff through. I can't think of his name. It's not Henry Siegel. It'll come to me.
No, there are real journalists. And when you look at things like the Gray Zone, there are real journalists, but the fake journalists, the talking heads, the corporate propagandists, they can't compete with that. So they have to shut it down. And there was a time in my lifetime, even, when the people that were sitting on the TV were actually journalists. Now, we might not have liked Dan Rather, but there was a point in time when those people would go out and investigate their stories and do their reporting and be on the ground and go to war zones. And they actually covered stories, and then they reported on their own stories. Now, people like Jake Tapper, he wouldn't know how to be a journalist if it hit his head.
Yeah, they're stenographers. Seymour Hersh was a person I was thinking
Seymour Hersh. Oh, yes. And he is also someone that is extremely knowledgeable about all things having to do Israel, and very big in that.
Yeah, he's really good. Seymour Hersh is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Love that guy. The lecture that he was giving on Dark Side of Camelot was so fascinating, because he was making this argument that Kennedy pissed a lot of people off because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because the thought was they were trying to kill Castro. And because they were trying to kill Castro, that Castro was like, look, I don't want to die. I'm just like anybody else. I want to breathe. I need help. And so Castro goes to get help from the Soviet Union, who basically puts missiles in the country. Kennedy ends up calling, I think it was Eisenhower, asking him, like, look, what is Khrushchev going to do? Are they going to launch it and stuff like that? He says, no, they're not going to launch. And he was wrong. They had the missiles were ready. And in fact, he didn't even need to get the order anymore to launch. If the United States would have struck, they would have launched immediately. So that would have been basically the end of the world. In this kind of weird situation, he was making the point of saying they were pissed off that he nearly ended the world. Like, and so the question becomes like, okay, but what does that mean? Pissed off to what extent? Or what are you arguing? Are you arguing that they off them? Because a lot of people make the argument that CIA off Kennedy. So like his book, Dark Side of Climate.
Well, you don't think that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, do you?
No, I don't. I don't for 1 minute. I don't believe in a dancing bullet. The bullet stops in midair and then turns around and hits the other guy. Yeah.
Right. No, it's magical bullet. And this one guy is just so capable. I mean, he was just so capable and organized about the whole thing.
It gets like X number of shots off in a short period of time with a gun that has to be cocked like multiple. Oh yeah, it's so impractical. It's so impractical.
It is.
But no, Seymour Hersh is amazing. The My Lai Massacre, he was the one that came out with that. So yeah, he definitely had his bona fides. But
I think it's important for people to know that there are actually real journalists out there.
Yeah, they are.
There are, and it's just they're harder to find, but there are out there.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I have a subscription to the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, because they do every so often do good work. I mean, like it's skewed. Don't get me wrong. There's a spin on it, but it's there. Like the New York Times, the recent piece about the Iranians. It's like in the first top, it says Iranian-backed group is attacked by the United States, something like that, over missile attacks that killed in Southern America. And then you get 8 paragraphs down, and it says it is unclear whether this group is backed by Iran. And it's like, wait a minute, but your title said Iranian-backed group.
Well, headlines are what matters. Headlines are what matters. So
headlines are what matters, but it's there. That's the point. Like it's like it's buried in there sometimes. And it was some of the most fascinating things. Like the New York Times running $1 billion weapons program that the United States, that basically Obama was trying to kick over Syria. Now they would never run it while he was doing it. They would always run it after the fact. So you can talk about the Vietnam War 20 years after. You can't talk about the Vietnam War during the Vietnam War. Is that nonsense? But they've been taking channels down for that. Like they've been like, if it's something that have trended in any particular way, if you're talking about the election in a particular way, if you're talking about the vaccines in a particular way, if you're talking about anything in a way that they consider to be, I don't know, counterproductive. I don't know what the word is for it. They will take the channel down. And so some of
like it's subversive. I think you're subversive. You know, you're stirring the pot, and it's dangerous. And they don't like that, which to me is code word for we're fascist and we want to dictate what you think.
Yeah, well, is there any line to you? Is there any line? Like there has to be a line.
Unless you are calling for imminent violence, or you're yelling fire in a crowded theater, or whatever the equivalent of that is that causes immediate harm, then to me, no. Then to me, I am fully and it's unfortunate that yes, there are people that will rely on poor information because they won't do the research, and that is. But you know what? That's sort of a necessary evil of the freedom of speech. And to me, that is the most sacred thing that we have, that and the press, and we're just letting it go to crap. I don't think people realize.
How do you stop the press from going to crap when you have the internet?
Well, I mean, it really has to do with having journalists that aren't on corporate payrolls and being able to, get the information out there. But to me, the way you combat bad information is with good information, not by censoring. And there's always going to be people that believe the wrong thing. And that is an unfortunate thing, but it's not worth taking down our freedom to be exposed to everything, including people like Alex Jones. And that's just, how I feel about it. I think it's a very slippery slope. I think it's very dangerous. And before I forget, I don't know if you're aware, but on March 20th, I'm doing a Pardon Assange live stream, co-hosting it with Katie Halper from 2 to 6 Eastern. And we're having people come on at different hours, different junctions. And I'd love to have you come on and participate if you would.
I'll consider it. Yeah, I'll consider it totally. Let me see what's
Okay.
going on. We've
Yeah.
been having more meetings at work.
So what is the status right now of your channel and what's going
The channel is back up. The channel is running normally. So after they apologize for taking it down by mistake, the very next 2 days later, I think it was like the day that we ran the show that morning for the radio show, and then by that evening was down again. And at that point, they were like, "Your channel's going to be down for a week because you put up, I think they say spam or misleading information." And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? In fact, I even did a Twitter thread showing how ridiculous this was. I said, here's the video, here's the end result, this is what I was saying in it, this is the etc. And these guys, they looked at the Twitter thing, it was like, yeah, we still decided that you were putting up spam, etc. It's like, and at that point, I was ready to break something. It is so aggravating for them because it's like a faceless entity. That's what it's like. And there's nobody to talk to, so there's no real people in the process.
No.
And there might be somebody who's sitting in their flip-flops who might say, okay, yeah, we're looking into it. And, they don't realize or recognize that there are people who are making a living off of
Yeah, it's a livelihood. It's your livelihood.
Their livelihoods are entangled into it. I remember.
So what did that do to it?
Secular talk.
What did that do? So now, even though you get put back up, it totally negatively affects your everything.
Yeah, it decimates your channel for the month. I mean, because at that point, no revenue is coming in for X amount of time. It decimates your channel. And even when you start to get back up and running, it still takes a while for people to kind of accrue back to the channel. Yeah. It really does handicap the channel, especially if it's over the course of a week or if they have like 2 weeks. I mean, they used to have it for like a month. I mean, and there's no accountability for it. YouTube does what it does. Google what it does. And you have other places like Rockfin now that are trying to kick into the mix. And I have a Rockfin channel, but I haven't entirely been putting YouTube too much stuff on it. But they can't compete entirely with YouTube yet. And so it's very aggravating, to put it mildly. And they have been going after people's content over stuff that, it treads the line into whether you're being a publisher or whether you're being a platform. I mean, they're making decisions on this stuff. And it's not like, how you make a determination whether something is harmful or not? Who makes that determination, whether it's harmful or not? Where does the line go? And if something is just not truthful and a conspiracy theory, that doesn't make it by definition harmful. Like if somebody like Stephen Greer is saying, all aliens are great and everybody is lovely and in the universe and so forth. Is he being harmful? Like, is that content that you should take down? Are you certain that he's lying, for one? And more importantly, is the content you should take down? What about the guy who's saying that the virus or the vaccine screaming about hydrochloroquine? Hydrochloroquine is the greatest thing ever. Do you take that guy down for screaming about hydrochloroquine, even though hydrochloroquine is not going to kill anybody? Like, I don't know where this line is, and I'm greatly uncomfortable with people who they not making that choice.
I don't know where it is, but I know that it should not be determined by a for-profit corporation. I think that at this point, these platforms need to be nationalized. I think that they need to be utilities. I think that all of the free speech needs to apply to it. I think we are way past just saying that it's just one thing. It's not one thing. That is the most common platform, whether you're talking about Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. This is now where everybody goes to communicate. It is
comments. I mean, and people are like, oh, they can just go and build another one. Get the fuck out of here.
No, you can't. It doesn't work that way.
Doing that. Yeah, nobody's going to do that. I mean, there are comments, and for better or for worse, people have a tendency to accrue to things, and in the case where they found an ability to communicate in this kind of way, and look. They're beautiful things on a certain level. I get that it's mean-spirited a lot of times. I get people are anonymously saying horrible, disgusting things to other people. But if you think about it, there's a social pressure that is now taking place over the world. And oftentimes that social pressure, you would feel it in your family or in your city or in your state or something like that. You may have a country with certain ideas and values. Well, now that's all over the world. And all of these cultures are basically bumping heads with one knowing what the other is doing in these kind of grand general terms. And in knowing that, it creates pressure. How do you act in comparison to somebody else? How do you act in comparison to this other country? Hey, China is doing a poverty program. Why aren't we doing a poverty program? Hey, Cuba is giving all of these medications to all of these people around the world. This place has universal health care. Hey, Denmark is paying this much for their hamburgers and for their minimum wage. Why are we paying this much? Like, it really does create the social pressure all over the world, where even though it's not necessarily something that's stated, it's something that is. If that makes sense. It's
yeah, you're just looking at how other people exist, and it's giving you this glimpse into which we never really had. Only people who traveled really were ever able to know those things.
And that's the other part. Anything that happens around the world in an instant, you know it. Like, and that wasn't there. Like, newspapers can go out, it would still take a while. And social media, not only do you know it, you could see it. Like, you could say, like, wow, look at it. When Iran shut down that airplane by accident, and you can see the missiles go up, and you can see the first missile hit, the second missile hit. You can see that within almost no time. And it's like you can hear the government of Iran make their case. You can see it for yourself. Nothing like that has existed before. Like, that's phenomenal. And so it's like you have all of these mean-spirited, hateful things that take place. But by the same token, there is something almost spiritual about this idea that human beings, almost in a grand consciousness, and just like any other, in your own mind, I would imagine you curse, you say things that are horrible to people when things happen that you just feel a particular way. And why would we expect our technology to be any different? It's not going to be. It's going to be Mad Libs. It's going to be all sorts of chaos and chaotic and everything else, these moments of beautiful things that happen. And there's something elegant about that in the sense that we are aware of that stuff now in a way that we never were. But yeah, it naturally, they should be made utilities. They are commons. And you know, let's stop pretending they're not at this point, and that these things should just be run by these companies with the sole purpose of profit. No, screw that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we very often on our show refer to the 1996 Telecom Act, courtesy of Ms. Clinton, and what that was really, to me, I mean, that was really like the final nail, I think, in the coffin of that, to sort of bring us to where we are now, where we have like no diverse opinions on mainstream. It's all the same. It's all corporate. And the people that think that it's such a difference between like Fox and MSNBC, but it really isn't. Because all the roads, all the money funnels to the same places. And it's all like, whether it's military industrial complex or whatever, you know, fossil fuel industry, big pharma. And that's who's in charge. So it doesn't really matter to me if you're saying something with a little bit of a left tint versus a little bit of a right tint when all roads are leading to the same place.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's media and the money that media gets. Media is influenced by that money. I mean, even if it's just not not saying something to offend the people who are paying you. Like, it's like let's say defense companies dumping money into a particular product or a particular newspaper, and that newspaper just never really says anything negative about that.
Well, they're lies of omission. It's lies of omission. And I find that, and it's not, and it isn't even that they don't talk about one thing, it's that, but it's also what they do talk about is nonsense and stupid nonsense, and creating issues, creating mountains out of molehills while ignoring the mountains. And it's just poor. And it's all just what serves them. And it's very frustrating. And most people that think they're informed, like I know a lot of people in my life, I'm sure you do, that they think they're very well informed. They get up, they watch CNN, they know what's going on. They're very informed. And unfortunately, those people vote. A lot of them. And this is what we're up against. And so it's like I said, it's constantly chipping away at the corporatism and just trying to break through. But I feel like every new person that I can explain something to or get to understand or whatever, it's just one more person that's on the right page, you know?
And I've had people who say that, who sent a letter saying, yo, I'm a right winger, but 70% of what you say I enjoy. And it's like, well, you're not a right winger. You're like, there's no way.
But you know. Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.